I haven't been testing many all-in-one power stations lately because I'm mostly focused on whole home installations. But this P310 that Affery sent me for testing has a unique combination of features at a very low price point. So I just had to check it out. With the Black Friday sale and additional exclusive discounts you can get using my code in the description below, you can get this unit for less than $1,000, just $993, and that's without tax incentive. You are not likely to beat that price anywhere else. But is it too good to be true? Welcome back to Projects with Everyday Dave. Let's see what 6 months of testing will tell us. If you're getting one of these units, you probably want to take advantage of free solar energy. So let's do the fun part first and check out solar charging. I plan to max out the solar input using my wood rack array. The P310 has a very respectable PV input. The max voltage is 160 volts and the current limit is 20 amps with a max power input of 2000 watts. The most important number is the max voltage. Never exceed the maximum input voltage or you could permanently damage your unit. For safety reasons, these portable units have a lower input voltage than residential scale inverters that can take in as much as 600 volts, and they make up for that with a much higher current limit. So to take advantage of that, we'll need to put two strings in parallel. These are 460 watt SunGold Power bifacial panels with an open circuit voltage of 41.75 volts. Taking our 160 volt max and dividing it by 41.75, we get 3.8 panels, so not quite 4 panels. If the voltage was, say, 36 volts, we could put 4 panels in a row. 3 panels in series is 3 times 41.75 volts, and that will give me a very safe maximum voltage of 125.25 volts. And that's plenty of margin to the 160 volt max, especially for cold weather and bifacial gain increases, gives us lots of room. So the first thing I'm going to do is put 3 of these panels in series. All right, I've connected my 2 extension cables, one starting at the end of the string. Then I've connected 3 panels in series, which just results in connecting them end to end. And then we'll take the negative off the end of the 3rd panel. So we have our positive and negative cables all the way down to the unit with our XT90 adapter that comes with the system, and we'll just plug that into our MC4 extension cable. Well, full clouds is over 300 watts. I guess we know that data point. With the clouds moved out, the 3 panels are achieving 1500 watts. That's almost 10% more than the rated output thanks to the bifacial gain. Now let's add 3 more and double the input. All right, I'll use a Y to take the negative from string 2 and the negative from string 1, and then we'll connect those to our input line. And then we'll take the positive from string 2 and connect it to the positive from string 1 on the other end with another Y. These Ys are super handy to have on hand, and I'll be sure and link to them in the description below. So here's the other end and our positive. Then I'll disconnect the positive lead from our string 1 and connect it to the Y. Now I can connect the Y to our input. All right, we should have double the power. And right now we're in the clouds and we're getting over 700 watts, nicely doubling what one string can do. And that's the advantage of overpaneling. When you're in the clouds, I actually do get double. Now, when we get to full sun, you'll see we don't get 3,000 watts because the unit can't utilize 3,000 watts. But if you want to be able to have enough power in shady moments, you might put more panels on using parallel connections than your unit can actually take advantage of. As long as you don't exceed the voltage, you can have a lot of extra panels. So let's see when the sun comes out what we actually hit. Should be 2,000 watts. Don't disappoint me. All right, it's ramping up. Look at that. 2010, 2018 watts. It actually went over a little over 2,000 watts, but it's hovering right in there, 2009. All right, we are maintaining over 2,000 watts continuously. So with some overpaneling, you can definitely hit the 2,000 watts this thing says it can do. Fans are starting to really pick up, so it definitely needs some cooling. You want to be sure and keep it in the shade if you're running that much power through it. It's going to charge pretty fast at this speed. All right, I put a clamp meter on the cable here to see what kind of current we're getting, and it's 17.6, 17.7 amps. So really close to the 20 amp max. 2,000 watts, we can get the voltage from that, and I'll post that up here to the maximum power point tracking point. It's going to be less than the open circuit voltage because in order to get to that max power, it pulls the voltage down a little bit as you load it up. If we had any less voltage, we might not be able to hit the max because then we'd be current limited. So you want to get the voltage as high as you can in order to take advantage of the current limitation. And that's a little bit of a balance you have to wade through. The included XT90 cable is very nice, but it's only 14 gauge. If you're going to max out the input like I am, I would recommend upgrading to at least 12 gauge. And I'll link to a 10 gauge version in the description below. That will handle anything you throw at it. Overall, I'm pretty happy with that performance. You have a really good voltage range to work with and a good current range to work with. You can use a lot of different panels and a lot of different configurations to get the 2000 watt maximum input. Sometimes when the voltage is limited or the current is limited, it's really hard to hit the maximum amount that a unit is rated for. This one, it shouldn't be too difficult. So pretty happy with that. When it comes to picking a solar panel, the best prices will be with fixed panels, and the best performance will be with bifacial panels. You should only buy a folding solar panel if you need it to be portable. The cost per watt is substantially higher than fixed panels. You can find lots of low-cost solar panel sources and discounts by clicking on the solar panel tab on my website, projectswithdave.com. I have a whole host of appliances and tools that you might want to be able to run off-grid, and I'm going to test all of them, maybe not all of them on screen. I've got a Keurig, a hot plate, a pressure pot, a 4-slot toaster, a microwave, an air fryer, and then I've got tools. We'll run a small air compressor, a large air compressor, a dust collector, other things like that to make sure that we've covered everything you would possibly need to do. And to run a microwave, you need a pure sine wave inverter, which this is, so we should have no problem with that. The only things I expect to have an issue with are the dust collector and the air compressor, some of the large power tools. You get over 1 horsepower on those induction motors, and that's where these units tend to struggle. So let's see what it can do. I took that cover off. It gets in the way. It gives me a little easier access. It's easy to do. You just flex it in the middle and it pops right out. And then I have an adapter here that will make it easier for me to test the 30 amp plug. I'll use a regular meter and a clamp meter to check the voltage and inrush current on some of the larger appliances to see how it's performing under those conditions. With the tester, you can see there's a floating neutral. So if you want to try and charge an EV with this, you'll need a ground neutral bond plug, and I'll link to one of those in the description. All right, let's get started. With no load, we're getting 120, almost 121 volts to start with, which is great. All right, let's heat a cup of water. $119.6, so still pulling almost exactly 120 volts. We're pulling 1200 watts, and it's splitting it evenly between the two batteries. Microwave running smoothly. No problem there. I kicked the air fryer on. That one pulls a lot on preheat. 1750 watts. We're still getting 119.8 volts. Very good result there. Now I'm pulling all of this from the 20 amp circuit. We're getting closer to that limit, so let's push it over and see what happens. Say you want to run the air fryer and the toaster at the same time. One slice. Whoo, that's already over 2600 watts. All right, with the air fryer on, we'll push the limits with the toaster. 1700 watts plus one toaster brings us to 2600 watts. That is more than the 20 amp circuit should be able to do. Let's see if we can make it fail. 3400 watts. The fans are starting to kick on. It's pulling pretty balanced load between the battery and the battery in the inverter. That's all coming out of the 20 amp circuits here. I'm fully expecting that to trip at any moment. The fans are really starting to pick up now. I don't know why that isn't tripping. We should only be able to get 2500 watts out of the 20 amp outlets. I'm guessing it's on a circuit breaker, and that circuit breaker hasn't gotten hot enough yet because it's just there. Oh, no, the toes popped up. All right. That was pretty good. We're running 3,400 watts out of just the 20 amp outlets, and I suspect if we run that long enough, it'll fail. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put enough load on there to make it fail so we can make sure that that actually works. So to do that, I'll add a 1,000 watt heater to it. I mean, that's gonna push it way over. All right, here we go. The air fryer, the toaster, $3,400 watts again. We're still at 119 volts. All right, let's kick the heater on. 35, 36. Voltage is dropping to 107 volts. Now these are all resistive loads, so it can help meter that load a little bit that way. It's not putting out more than 3,600 watts, and it's just regulating the voltage a little to achieve that. What in the world? I cannot get this thing to fail. Add food. Okay. Toaster's on. Well, I don't know why that's not failing. With the toaster, the air fryer, the Keurig, and the heater, there's no way it can hold that up. See if I can get them all going here. We'll start with the Keurig. The fans come down right away. That's pretty nice. Okay, the Keurig's pulling 1,400 watts. Air fryer. There we go, 3,000. Toaster. We're down to 103 volts. 3,600 watts. So it will not put out more than 3,600 watts. It just starts cutting the voltage to maintain these things. And since they're all resistive loads, it can do that. Okay, that's not ideal if you're trying to run sensitive electronics and things like that for the voltage to just drop. But if you're at a campsite and you want to run your heater and your air fryer and your Keurig and everything all at the same time, apparently it will do it. Just adjust the voltage a little so everything gets a little less power. It take a little bit longer for your things to get hot, but it's still working. All right, let's put this heater on it. Okay, 94 volts. There, I finally pushed it over the edge. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Well, I had to add a 1,000 watt heater, the air fryer, the Keurig, a double slot toaster to get this thing to shut off. And you saw we pulled down to 94 volts before it finally kicked out. That's both impressive and not ideal. It's doing its best to hold up the loads, which if all you're running is resistive loads, that's great. I mean, you can run all kinds of things, and that was all off the 20 amp circuit. I didn't even have to use the 30 amp circuit. But just keep in mind, if you're pushing this thing over 3,600 watts and you have sensitive electronics, it's dropping as low as 94 volts, and that's not good for those kind of things. Resistive loads, no problem. Microwave, probably also not going to like that. So if you're putting a lot of loads on it and you're running sensitive electronics, just make sure you don't exceed the 3,600 watts. I don't know what to say. That was really hard to fail. So I'll run a long-term test at 3,600 watts. I'll use my water heater and we'll load this up to about 3,600 watts and we'll just let it run for a while. Make sure that we can get at least, 15, 30 minutes with no issues. All right, I'm back. I was able to run for half an hour at 3,600 watts right about and no issues. It just ran continually. And of course you can see by the high load test that it would just throttle the voltage to make sure it didn't go over 3,600 watts. So it's basically designed to run at 3,600 watts continuously. And that's pretty impressive. Let's try some of these higher inductive loads and see if it can push some of this larger equipment. This is one we're not likely to be able to do, but we'll give it a shot. Got my inrush meter so we can measure the inrush current. I'm really surprised. Now I let all the air out of it, so it had the best shot of starting it, but that's impressive that it was able to start that. I don't know if I've had any other inverter that could do that. That's one of these small power stations anyway. And that time I didn't do it. Had 52 amps of inrush. All right, when the compressor was completely empty, it could start. But once there's some pressure behind it, it just can't quite do it. It's just about 50 amps of inrush, and then it doesn't make it. But the fact that it was ever able to start at all is really impressive. I'm pretty excited about that. Let's try the dust collector. Nothing can ever run that. Let's see. Let's try the dust collector. All right, we had 49 amps of inrush, and we had 50 on the air compressor, so those are really close, but it was actually able to start it up, and that's impressive. I very rarely have a system that can start up this dust collector. Now, I wouldn't run large power tools on these units, but that gives you a really good idea of how capable they are. You should have no issues running your daily household appliances, even a skill saw, that small compressor. In fact, let's just start that up real quick, just for reference. As I expected, no issues. So, a skill saw, small pancake compressor, all those kinds of things, no problem, run them all day. All your household appliances, just about anything you can plug into a 120 outlet, you'll have no issue with. I would not plan to run large air compressors, dust collectors, large table saws, things like that. While it may be able to start them, it's going to be pretty hard on the equipment, and so I wouldn't do that. But that gives you an idea of what it's actually capable of. This is really impressive. That's pretty much all I can say. For power output, this unit has everything you will need, plus some bonus features that I really like. There are 2 USB-A ports and 4 USB-C ports, and one of them has a high power 100 watt output. And these can be turned on and off independently from the 12 volt DC outputs. This unit has several 12 volt options, a standard car adapter 10 amp outlet, 2 3 amp barrel jacks, and a very nice 25 amp XT60 outlet. You would want to use a 10 gauge cable to take advantage of that much current. I've linked to one in the description below. The actual 12 volt output is regulated at about 13.5 volts, dropping as low as 13 volts under full load. A very nice 12 volt setup overall. The AC output provides 4 outlets with a 20 amp capacity and 1 30 amp outlet. The Afery's AC charging has one of my favorite features, and that's the physical adjustable dial for regulating the charge rate. It's selectable in increments from as low as 300 watts to a high of 1500 watts. There are a couple of key reasons you might want this feature. First, silent charging. I use a power station as a backup for my computer workstation, but the one I have now only charges at full power and has very loud fans that kick on whenever it's boosting the battery capacity. If you set the Afery to 300 watts, it can charge indefinitely completely silent, and you can charge up to 900 watts with a very low fan noise. At 1500 watts, you should be able to reach 80% in 2 hours and 100% in 2.5 hours. The second and really more critical reason is for charging with a load-limited source such as a generator. If you have a 1000 watt generator, you can set the charge rate to 900 watts to optimize your fuel consumption without overloading the generator. Or you could set it to 600 watts to leave some headroom for running other things. I love this feature, and I wish every power station offered it. I also did a test where I discharged the expansion battery completely and fully charged the P310 battery to see how it would perform. It immediately started shifting energy to the battery with the lower state of charge and pulled more energy from the battery with the higher state of charge. I am really impressed with the external battery active balancing capabilities that this unit has. It's the best that I've seen.
Look at that, they're starting to even out. That one's barely moved, it's only up to 69%. This one's all the way up to 62%. They're both charging, but they're equalizing as they charge. That is great.
The P300 has a stated capacity of 3.85 kilowatt hours, which is great because in the US, the IRS requires that the battery storage technology have a capacity of at least 3 kilowatt hours to qualify for the 30% residential clean energy credit. Check with your tax advisor, but if you pay taxes, you could get a refund to help cover the cost of this unit. I ran several capacity tests, a constant AC capacity to check the efficiency, an intermittent AC capacity using my refrigerator for a real-world performance check, and a DC capacity test. For the constant AC test, I used my water heater pulling a little over 1400 watts. It held the voltage up pretty well at 117 volts. It lasted 2 hours and 31 minutes with an output of 3.652 kilowatt hours, achieving 95% of its rated capacity. That's as high as I've seen on one of these all-in-one power stations. I ran another capacity test with one expansion battery connected. It ran for 5 hours and 1 minute with a total output of 7.23 kilowatt hours, or 94% of the combined rating of 7.7 kilowatt hours. Another great result. You can attach up to 2 expansion batteries for a total capacity of 11.55 kilowatt hours. Based on my testing, that would give you a usable capacity of 10.85 kilowatt hours. For the intermittent load test, I used my refrigerator. This highlights the impact of idle losses, which is the power that the inverter consumes while it's on but not running anything. The stated idle consumption is 25 watts. Not amazing, but not terrible either. With no expansion battery, my fridge ran for 28 hours and 54 minutes. It consumed only 2.61 kilowatt hours out of the rated 3.85 kilowatt hours, or 68% of the available capacity. It appears over 1 kilowatt hour was consumed in idle losses, which is actually an idle consumption of closer to 36 watts. This is an important test. If you're leaving the inverter on all day and only using it intermittently, you'll have to plan for a significant reduction in usable capacity. Idle losses is something you have to account for no matter what power station you plan to use. Finally, the DC capacity test. I used the XT60 12-volt port to supply power to another battery and measured the output with my Victron shunt. The P310 supplied 13.4 volts at 9.24 amps, or 124 watts, until completely depleted. The total energy delivered was 3.65 kilowatt hours out of the rated 3.85 kilowatt hours, or 94% of the rated capacity. Also a very nice result. The DC idle consumption is rated at 10 to 15 watts, so much less parasitic than the AC side. And that's one of the reasons you want to use DC whenever possible. Well, as we've seen, the actual performance for the P310 is quite good. I have no complaints other than the loud fan noise under high loads could be improved a little bit, but at least there's a silent mode. There are a couple of other things that we should touch on. First, there's an app that allows for remote control. It provides broad control of the unit, including turning the AC and DC inputs on and off. You can run it in quiet mode, which is important to me. You can also limit the solar input, which you may want to do to control the fan noise as well. Afery's not a well-known brand, but they do offer a 7-year warranty. If you want to contact Afery, you can only do it by email or chat, but they are responsive to both methods within 24 hours. If you've had any experience, good or bad, please leave a comment below for everyone's reference. From November 20th to December 1st, using my link and the discount code in the description below, you can get this unit for just $993. An all-in-one package with a 3.6 kilowatt inverter and a 3.8 kilowatt hour battery is an amazing deal that you can't get even with a DIY solution. You can also get a great package deal with the P310 and the P310B expansion battery for only $1,911. Plus, you could qualify for a 30% tax credit if you get it before the end of the year. If you want to see other power station options, watch this video right here. If you want to build your own system, watch this video. You can find lots of free resources for going solar on my website, projectswithdave.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.